Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on getting most out of assets. I was talking to our Atlassian marketplace contact, and apparently, assets is one of the most requested topic in the Atlassian community. So, would love to give our perspective and share our best practices, etc. Um, for those who are new, assets is a configuration management database within the Jira service management module. Um, so with that, joining with me today is Nishant Sasi. Nishant is a Atlassian platform strategist at Procore. Prior to his current role, Nishant was a Atlassian solution engineer specializing in Jira service management. So he has a lot of first-hand information on how assets, the use of it, and within the context of JSM as well. Before we get into the agenda, couple of housekeeping items. Please mute your phone so that we can avoid background noise. If you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat window. We'll cover them during the Q&A section as well as when we give our overviews and demos as well. This webinar is being recorded and we will share the recording in our YouTube channel. All right. So what we're gonna do is Nishant and I gonna cover a little bit of overviews. We'll set the context on assets, share our perspective, best practices. How customers can get maximum value out of their assets implementation. Followed with a demo so that we can see the topics that we cover, and then we'll give time at the end for Q&A. Let me set the context. So, as I mentioned, assets is a configuration management database. It means it's an extensible framework where you can define schema for a variety of data objects. At the start, most customers tend to use assets as an inventory checklist of their hardware assets, my laptops, my mobile phones, etc. As I showed in this diagram, if we look it up at a fundamental employee level where I can bring in the organization data, meaning the employee's role, department, location, cost center, the things that are in the HR system of the organization. Stepping it up with the identity management data. This is your Azure Active Directory, Entra ID, Okta, Savient, your identity management platform, where you can bring in the role, the group, the licenses, the entitlements, which is all having an entity relationship at the employee level. Now we come into the hardware assets, like typically managed in a device management system like Intune or Kandji or other open source device management systems like a Snipe IT, etc. Right? Now you have a much rich 360-degree view of your organization, right? Just to summarize, your employee organization data from your HR system, identity management for roles, groups, licenses, device data from Intune, Kandji, Snipe IT systems, right? Now, with that rich entity relationships, the value comes from the following areas, right? Now I can use the asset entities in my ticket for auditing, for analysis compliance, use it in Jira automation as well as in workflows. Let me give you an example. Let's say when there is a termination request comes in from a HR system. Automatically, by looking up the asset schema, I can pull up the roles that the user belongs to, the licenses that the user holds, the hardware that is assigned, the office location space that is assigned to it. And for each of that activity, we can automatically create a ticket to make sure that the offboarding happens and the assets are released for the employee to successfully complete the offboarding, right? So with that overview, let me bring in Nishant in the conversation to share his perspective, share his knowledge on using assets, and then we will continue with the demo aspect of it. Over to you, Nishant.
Thanks, Prabhu. Hello, everyone. This is Nishant here. Glad to be here with the webinar on assets. Assets has always been my favorite topic. I've been in this space for 18 years, implementing assets, not only for employee data. It can be anything from inventory, from maybe having assets information, storing train positive train controls for safe riding, or even rape kits for detective work in police departments. So Assets has the flexibility to store any operational data set your organization depends on, right? So it can be employment information, as Prabhu said, the identity, access data, device inventory, licenses, the app entitlements of those for that employee, and more. So Access doesn't become valuably simply by storing data. Its true value emerges when organizations thoughtfully design their schema and automate the flow of high quality data into it. Why is this very much important? Because once you have bad data, or you can throw in so many data into the CMDB. I've seen customers, after a point in time, they can't actually maintain it. So it's very much important to actually to have that thoughtful design of the schema. So in this page, you can see the Onward fetches the employee data from the HRIS system, like let's say Workday or ADP or factors, and it fetches things like name, email, which is very much important for in Jira world, the account ID, right? So we need to look up the account ID through the email, the title, the department. So the department can dictate a few other things in the automation rules. The manager for approvals. So who will be that employee's manager? And let's say the employee type, it's a full-time employee, part-time employee, contractors. So this can be in a real world scenario, it can be like, oh, I'm requesting a software. Am I entitled to it? If I'm entitled to it, who are the approvers? Maybe the full-time employee might have full access. The contractor might need additional layers of approval, maybe a specific approval, maybe a manager approval. All these things can be data driven. And of course, the office location, which ties into the facilities schema if you do so. And then it also bring the identity data, right, from Okta, things like users, groups, apps, license tiers, things like access roles. What is the MFA status of that identity? So this builds the account, group, license, and entitlement object types in the schema. And finally, as Prabhu mentioned, we can also fetch device data such as laptop inventory, phones from Intune, Jamf, or Kandji. And we'll have things like serial numbers, device, encryption status, OS versions, and the other metadata associated with it, right? So this also enables things like automated asset assignment, offboarding collection flows, as Prabhu mentioned, and compliance aware approvals. So everything is mapped to this asset schema, enriched and normalized, deduplicated, and relationally linked to it, right? So, and finally, a tool like Onward will be loading the cleanest data set into the assets via the tool. At this point of time, assets as a whole becomes a central operational graph used by Jira Service Management. So that's the consumers, right? The consumers are the users via the Jira Service Management. Prabhu, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide, we more demonstrate like how JSM uses asset data. For example, a user submits a request, right, for a new hire onboarding. So again, the automation triggers, it queries the assets, it looks at the role, department, manager, the required access, and then the JSM dynamically generates subtask. Even the subtask can be stored in assets. We can have a certain number of subtasks for certain kind of roles, and we can populate the task via automation, right? And also provision actions. You can have further provisioning actions to, let's say, Okta or Entra ID or Slack, for example, as well. So all these dozens of manual steps are replaced by automation, and which also kind of ensures that consistency across onboarding and access controls as well. So here's where everything we just talked about comes together, right? When assets is modeled well, I'm going to reiterate it many times because it's very much important, right? When it's modeled well, the JSM automation stops behaving like a simple rule engine and starts behaving like a context-aware decision engine. So instead of relying on like a static, hard-coded workflow condition, JSM evaluates real dynamic information inside the assets graph, identifying who the employees are, what identity they have, what hardware they own, which license they already consume, and what they're entitled to receive. So many things can be done through that. And because all these are in the connected graph, we know the correct manager, whether the person needs a PC or a Mac, if the license already exists, and automatically assign the onboarding task as I mentioned. So this is the power of context, right? Automation becomes more adaptive, not static. Provisioning becomes more accurate. There's no guesswork involved, and approvals becomes instant and not manual. The entire employee lifecycle becomes self-driving. And this is why assets is far more than a CMDB. CMDB was the initial concepts, but it's the operational memory and the decision layer of your ITSM ecosystem altogether. So let's pause a bit, right? So I spoke a little bit on the employee dynamics and employee onboarding example. So beyond employee and device data, I mentioned about rip kits by the police departments. Assets can also power some of the most advanced operational use cases, especially in change management and maybe in SecOps, right? In change management, you can store risk models by scoring directly into assets. You can have a business service of higher risk, and we can correlate it with service criticality, dependency depth, incident history, blackout windows. So JSM can calculate this change risk dynamically instead of relying on this manual judgment or static workflow branches. Another use case is around standard changes. You can have, maybe you are submitting a change often, and this is kind of like a pre-approved change. You can store that in assets. So whenever a change matches a standard change, you have all the implementation plan, test plan, rollback plan, who owns the team, and JSM can auto approve it, generate task, and bypass maybe cab entirely by it. And another example I can give is around operational standards and policies where assets can store, practice-wide logic like priority metrics, SLA tiers, who are the required approvers. Sometimes you may have, a set of approvers for a certain set of applications. Maybe it is for maybe a FedRAMP environment. You need additional approval layers, and you can store those approvers in um, in assets. So think about it as a container of objects as well, right? It's container of objects and how you actually derive your functionality and solution through that. And finally, you can also have things like SecOps data, storing device compliance, privilege access controls, some of the app risk categories, vulnerability severity in assets. So you can, when those kind of issues comes through your workflows, you can block risky requests. You can escalate approvals or notify SecOps based on the real-time posture. So in short, with these patterns, assets becomes more than a CMDB,
Yep.
and it becomes the governance and decision engine for your change risk and SecOps workflows. So yeah, I'll stop there. Prabhu.
No, very good overview, Nishant. Like, no, I think that what we can do is that inspire those design ideas so that folks listening in can utilize assets for their requirements and make those decision engine and the automations work for them. Um, Great. Thank you, Nishant. So now just extending it, right? Like the overviews and the use cases Nishant mentioned. Um, it starts with that modeling, right? So what is that I can use assets for? I could have an employee schema that has all the employee details from the HR system and the important field values, if you will. My the Jira user, it's mapped to the locations, the details, the manager name, as Nishant mentioned. So that way, you can build intelligent workflow approvals based on the user's manager, etc. The assets that the user hold. So, the assets module have different attributes set up. So I could have a user object, default text, and a dependency object. Like, I could say this employee holds these roles groups in the Azure level. These are all the assets that the user holds at the device management system level, etc. So the core thing starts with modeling. It could have a worker mod, schema, Azure schema for licenses groups, Intune schema, HR from a different system, etc. And to Nishant's point, right? So these are all ideas. Now you can extend it for holding up for your anything that will help you with the decision man, like from a software development standpoint, the policies and the risk rules, so that it is an easier lookup in the schema. So take time like any other database design. This is a key topic to make sure the design is done to your requirements. So that way, you can see what's the parent object, what's the child, what's the relationship, what is the attribute type, etc. The good news is it's a very extensible framework. I could have multiple schemas, multiple parent-child relationship, different entities. It can quickly go out of control, and you may lose out the value in terms of where and what data is stored. So like any other design, keep it iterative and keep it disciplined in a way, so that way the data that is held in the schemas are of value and does not become the classic garbage in and garbage out type of it. So that's the initial one, the design aspect of it. Then once you define it, the naturally the question comes like, how am I gonna see this schema? Where is my source? Assets have a import module where we can have integrations set up, where the system provides default imports to from a CSV, JSON, etc. What we have done is we have built our own imports from variety of systems, HR systems, identity management systems, device systems, where it can have an automated import aspect of it. And what this import allows is the automation, where these schema objects that you see can be kept in sync with the source of truth, which is an external application, or within Jira itself. So integration plays a important role, where how what is the freshness of the data and how often it is synchronized. So depending on your data schema, you can define what's the source of truth for the employee data, source of truth for identity management, devices, and others, so forth. Again, I'm using it in the context of an employee life cycle. But to Nishant's point, if you have a project, if you have a use case, and there is a decision system where it can lead to automation, depending on it, you could have suppliers, you could have vendor management, you could have third party risk profiles, etc. in the schemas, and you could use it for your Jira service management workflows. The next
Just
piece of it, once I have the schema, I also have the integration. I could immediately, without even bringing in the ticket, I could see the activities, if you will, meaning I could see what the source of truth of this particular data sets, what are all the objects linked into these data sets. For example, for this employee, these are the reporting managers. For this particular employee, what are all the hardware assets that they own, etc. It becomes a quick audit and compliance and a reporting mechanism. Assets has a query language called assets query language. Very easy to filter, very easy to look up data, and let's say for example, I want to list out all the employees where the warranty of the laptops assigned to them is gonna expire in the next 6 months. Very easy to run reports and compliance, so that you can identify and create tickets to make sure the warranty stays within it. The next comes in, how do I use these assets in my projects, or within the Jira tickets? The good news is, like with any other fields, you could add a custom field, and that custom field can be mapped to your asset object. So that way, you could add that custom field into your request types, then immediately that request types have that visibility. We could immediately look up for that particular ticket, what are the assignments that I could make, and all that asset object mapping is done to the ticket. Now I can quickly look it up and say, for this particular request, what are the assets assigned. This is one way of it. The automation can happen. So, for example, if there is an inbound ticket where an employee says, my laptop is not working, I can automatically write a Jira automation rule where for that incoming ticket, I can look up and attach the assets that is assigned to that employee from the asset schema. So that the support engineer will inherently have intelligence on, okay, this is the laptop that the employee is talking about, and quickly look up all the configuration associated with it. That's where the value comes in. And once that set up, right now you have multiple options where I can use it at the ticket level, I can use it at the Jira automation level, and as well as at the workflow level, where you could model the automations, model where even not even an automation, where a support team member can make an informed decision where all the information is presented to them with clarity so that they can make that resolution for that, giving a much better employee experience. Hope that demo overview is useful. Now let me bring it all together, right? Um, so, what are the immediate benefits that you get out of it? As I mentioned, you have an enhanced experience, if you will, right? Because if we look at the ticket level, I have enough information that I could attach it to the ticket, whether it's the asset for hardware licenses or additional information that would be useful. You have that information available. The assignments, and which is both linking as well as delinking, where hey, this is the laptop assigned to it for the new hire, or for this termination request, make sure this laptop is collected back, and so forth, where that becomes like where there is an auditing compliance requirement. You have that information available, easy to make that configuration.